Hello. Today I will be featuring the Algérie, the tier 7 French cruiser. If you're wondering why I'm not featuring any of the higher ones, it's because I haven't gotten to play them yet. Because, well, we have to, even us CCs have to regrind these lines. We only get them unlocked when we test them, but when they're fully released, we have to grind them just like everyone else. And sadly that means you'll have to wait a while for me to cover the Henry 4, because I never got to play the buffed one, so I don't really know what it goes for. It does look fairly promising though, but once again, I have to play a ship before I give any sort of final call. So the Algerie itself is a surprisingly strong tier 7 cruiser. It's quite squishy. It has a large citadel. I mean, it does have the spaced armor thing going for it, but ultimately though, you kind of feel like a Pensacola because of the citadel size. You are quite squishy indeed. But if you run Concealment Expert as I do, you get the stealth, as you saw I showed the stats at the beginning, you get the stealth down to 11.8, which isn't that bad. Considering you have one of the best ranges in the game for a cruiser, you have 17.9 kilometers of range. So the long range, you can actually quite comfortably sit at long range and just burn people down. And of course, I just popped speed boost, and as you can notice, it actually lasts 4.5 minutes. It was buffed to 3 minutes by Wargaming for all French cruisers, and of course if you run the speed boost module that I recommend you get either from ranked or from coins, you are able to extend this duration to 4.5 minutes, which means that you can pretty much use speed boost all game long, besides the times it's on cooldown. You can just pop it whenever you feel like, and you will spend the majority of the games with speed boost active. That's of course a very nice bonus, and since it especially affects acceleration and deceleration, it's very useful. It's not that useful for actively dodging shells though, because you lose so much speed in the turns, like your speed really plummets when you try to turn, but it's good overall for the handling and repositioning yourself and all these other things that you use speed boost for. Angling incoming shells, punches through the deck, still hits me for 5k. You might notice that I'm landing, of course, shells at 17.2 km without too many issues. The shell arcs are pretty arcing, pretty lazy, but I think that the shells don't have too much air drag, so they're pretty comfortable to use, and you can land hits on battleships at these ranges without any issues. This of course applies to both lower tier and higher tier battleships. In fact, it's easier to hit higher tier battleships mostly because they are bigger. So this ship scales very well against higher tiers. Having that additional range makes it even better at these things, because well, it's much easier to dodge when you have a huge range gap between you. You get plenty of time. The maneuverability on the ship is quite good, as I mentioned. I think the turning circle was like 660 meters, which is very good for a cruiser. And with the speed boost active, you accelerate and deaccelerate very quickly, as I mentioned. And with the speed boost active in straight lines, you're actually quite fast. So as a kiting, fire spamming, well, HE spamming and fire starting cruiser, the Algerie is probably one of the best at tier 7. The other competitor would be something like York or maybe Pensacola, but this thing really is a monster at this task. The reload is 12 seconds, which isn't very impressive, but you can reach a pretty nasty fire chance of 19% per shell. The default is 15, I think, and then you add Demolition Expert and you get it to 17, and then if you pop the flags on top, you get it up to 19%. So 90% fire chance with 8 shells, you can do the math, but ultimately it means that you are very good at starting fires on everything. The AP is not that useful, much like the York. In fact, the AP is only useful at very close ranges, and it's pretty common for the ships to have some sort of weakness like this, but compared to many of the other French cruisers, the Algerie I consider very strong. 2 fires in a volley, always satisfying, especially as that guy has burned his repair. So I'm just gonna switch to the next target from this one. The La Galissonière, I didn't actually cover it this time. I completely skipped it, the tier 6. And that's because I was so disappointed when I played it. For those that aren't aware, the La Galissonière, which was the tier 6 French cruiser, it got nerfed massively after I posted my commentary on it. Or well, my first impression. It had a 7.5 second reload, and they nerfed it down to a 10-second reload. And that made Galissonière play... It just plays so anemically now, because it still wasn't as strong as the Cleveland or the Budionni, but with the previous reload it was a valid competitor against both of them, and you felt like you could really do some work with those guns. But with a 33% damage nerf, it just feels so crippled. The guns are not strong enough to justify having such a long reload on them. So I really didn't enjoy the new Galissonière at all. It feels like the one thing that it had, which was the fast firing guns, has kind of been robbed from it, and it was a pretty unfun experience, which is why I just blew a chunk of free XP and jumped to the Algerie. It's not terrible, but if you guys had experienced the previous La Galissonière, which I very much enjoyed, in fact in my commentary I was very happy about that ship, if you had experienced that and then you were forced to play this current one, you would probably understand why I free XP'd it, because it really felt like an unfun experience. Here of course we see the effects of the arcing shells that I spoke of. It's very easy to just park the ship behind any sort of island coverage and just lob shells above it. The shells look lazy, but the travel time isn't really that long, and as I said, it's quite comfortable to land these shells. I haven't had much issues landing long-range shells, especially on battleships, of course. So as a long-range HE spammer, this ship is pretty excellent. Spec-wise, I think right now I have expert marksman on it, but I've noticed that you don't really need expert marksman on the French cruisers at all, because the turret traverse is so good. It might be useful on the Henry, but at least before the Henry, none of these ships really need it, including the Algerie. The turret traverse was buffed. It was one of the changes since I last played this ship, and it's pretty obvious that it no longer needs it. I think with expert marksman I have something like a 23-second turret traverse, which is more than enough for a cruiser, and I think expert marksman only adds 1 or 2 seconds, so it's pretty pointless. So those are 2 points I could be speccing somewhere else. I of course run Adrenaline Rush as well, Demolition Expert, Concealment Expert, and I run AFT. I do have a 19-point captain on this guy, of course, since I can't be arsed leveling a new one, since I already have them from when I tested these ships. But AFT doesn't really have any impact on this commentary at all, since there's no carrier. The anti-air isn't that special to begin with. The only reason I run AFT and AA range is that you can get 7.2 km, and you can, with defensive AA active, you can shoot down some planes and gain some additional XP and influence and so forth. But the impact the AA has isn't that big. The AA gets better at tier 9, mostly tier 8 you're still gonna be stuck with pretty anti-air on the French cruisers. So overall this is actually a pretty good ship. The Algerie is a pretty good ship. It's squishy. You shouldn't be expecting to win too many close range fights, of course, unless you can land those nasty torps, but straight up close range fighters should have an advantage against you. And since the armor overall on it is quite weak, you hit a lot of HE damage as well if people do spam HE against you. So most of the time you wanna be dodging shells and not tanking them. You don't want to be angling against shells and tanking them like you do in some cruisers. For example, the Mayoko can get away with this quite well. You want to play it more like a Pensacola, where you actively dodge shells and you make sure you don't get hit by them at all, which is quite similar to the York playstyle. Kite, HE spam, so forth. The torps, at this point you have the 9-kilometer torps, but you only have 3 per side, and these 3 torps, they are okay. I mean, I don't think I've landed too many of these yet while I've been playing this ship. It's only 3 torps, and most of the time you don't really want to be close enough to be using them in this ship, because this ship isn't a brawling type. It's angled so the AP bounces. I do get 1 superstructure penetration, but I switch back to HE instantly. I was hoping he would come charging around the corner and I could 1-2 punch him with AP plus torps, but no such luck. And you can notice even though I'm angled very well against this guy, he's still absolutely wrecking me. So spamming HE behind me, I get 2 fires. I know he's used his repair, so I shoot a volley at the Bayern behind him as well. Now I'm gonna try to hit the nose of this guy, and I start a fire on the Bayern behind him as well. So as a fire starter, the ship is excellent. Aiming for his nose so I can get a 3rd fire going. Okay, that guy is guaranteed dead. 3 fires, no repair. I'm not gonna bother shooting at him anymore. I'm just making sure his volley doesn't kill me, and I'm just kiting away. And I'm just gonna be focusing on his body behind him instead. Arsonist, not surprisingly, he burns to death, and I start burning the guy behind him. I forced his repair earlier by shooting over the islands, and he's got 2 fires on him as well. You notice with speed boost active, I am not having too many issues of kiting away from these guys and creating more distance, which is something you want to do. Because if you can't actively dodge the shells, but you have to angle against them, as you see I've been doing here, well, I had 30k HP when this fight against these 2 Bayerns broke out around the island. I have 4.8k HP now. So it shows just how terrible this ship is at tanking shells of any kind. You just want to be kiting. You want to be kiting, avoiding, dodging. On the bright side though, when you do run, since you can get away with getting Adrenaline Rush for almost no penalty, in fact it's probably the best tier 2 perk, at this point your reload is less than 10 seconds, which means you're the lower HP you get, the better of a HE spammer you become. I launched Torps, but one of my pet peeves in this game is that Torp spreads are random. They are completely random. They have this set area within which they will launch, but they can pretty much go stack as much to one side or the other as they want. And of course, knowing my fantastic RNG luck in this game, the torpedoes managed to stack to the left. 2 of them went to the left and 1 to the right, and there's this perfect Bayern-sized gap. So he doesn't even have to dodge, they just go past him. So I haven't been very impressed with these torpedoes. They can be useful, but not something to count on too much. I burned down the other Bayern as well, 146,000 damage, and it looks like the last Fuso is getting cornered up there by my team. So this the reason I chose this game was it shows the very basic gameplay. You try to tank, you get wrecked, you kite, and you burn, and you actually do really well in this ship. So it has very distinct strengths and quite distinct weaknesses as well. I mean, you're not going to be getting too much credits, it's just a silver ship. The XP is okay, did top the scoreboard, we kind of rolled this game, so yeah. But the thing is, the playstyle, even though these were tier 6 battleships, the playstyle is identical against higher tier ships. You play exactly the same. You kite, you burn, you kite, you burn. That's how you play it, and I think it's gonna get pretty boring because tier 8 and tier 9 also play the same way. So we'll see how much grinding I can be arsed doing on this and how much free XPing I will be doing, simply because I probably won't be arsed grinding through entire lines of HE kiting spammers. And damage wise, no surprise, the vast majority is fire damage. 19 fires, a lot of fire damage. Potential damage 1 million, not that much. I only ate 22 shells, but those were almost enough to kill me, which kinda tells the story of this cruiser. Anyway, let's move on to my recommended build, and the build that well, in general, the kind of build you want to be using if you plan on leveling through the French cruisers. Starting off, we of course have the modules. Now, the first thing I would recommend getting is the hull upgrade. Not only does it give you a nice 6k HP, which of course is a very big deal when you have 30k HP, but it also significantly helps your maneuverability. If you run the rudder shift module, as I recommend, then you should be running 10.7 seconds, and this cuts it, or it should be 10.7 seconds, and when you upgrade the hull, you drop it down to 7.6, which makes it a lot easier to actually avoid those shells. Because as I said in the Algerie, you don't really want to be exposing that citadel because it is fairly massive. So you want to be wiggling and avoiding shells in general. So first upgrade, hull. Second upgrade, range. Priority-wise, consumables. I would say damage control and probably speed boost. because once again, speed is your ally, dodging is your ally, and then you can get defensive AA and fighter plane as you see. I don't really recommend Hydro. I'd rather take defensive because, well, you shouldn't be in the front lines duking it out with DDs to begin with because, well, the ship doesn't really do that well in the front lines. Upgrade wise, main armaments mod 1, AA range. Once again, we're slotting defensive AA, and in general, you gain such small benefits from aiming systems mod 1 on cruisers that there's not really much point. Finally, of course, engine boost mod, the 50% increase to the speed boost, which is why it's instead of 3 minutes, it's 4.5 minutes, and rudder shift. Captain perks wise, well, first and foremost, every single cruiser needs priority target. That's pretty much straightforward. Then it becomes pretty interesting with the expert marksman. You kind of don't really need it on the Algerie, and this is a pretty common theme. In fact, do you even need it on the Charles Martel? Let's see. What's the rudder shift? I mean, turret reverse. No, you don't really need it here either. So ultimately, I'm probably going to be speccing away from this because I'm looking at all these turret traverses, and the turret traverse on all these ships seems fine enough to easily deal without having it at all. So that's honestly 2 points wasted. So just get Adrenaline Rush, follow it up with Fire Chance, Demolition Expert, and get Concealment Expert. Once you have these, you get some options. I recommend getting Superintendent, not just for this additional speed boost, but of course when you start hitting higher tiers, you're gonna get the heal as well, so you'll be wanting that thing eventually. I'm currently using AFT, which I think is pretty okay since it increases your panic range on your AA, so you can reach 7.2, which makes you much more useful at helping defend yourself and your bodies with your anti-air. Even though Algerie anti-air isn't much to brag about, the anti-air does get better, especially the tier 9 has a very good anti-air. At this point though, the last 2 points, or in this case multiple last points, there are so many options. I might even go double fighter plane and perhaps preventive maintenance, or that actually looks like one of the best options really to go for the last 2 points. Alternatively, you might go vigilance, but I don't know if you actually need it. Once again, these ships play starting at tier 7 and higher. These are very much long range ships, so you're not really going to be in vigilance range. I will have to look forward to see what I would spec with the last few points, but as of right now, safe bets is priority, Adrenaline Rush, Demolition Expert, Concealment Expert, Superintendent, and AFT. These are all very safe, generic, useful picks that you will unlikely to regret at any point. Yeah, Charles Martel gets fairly good anti-air, as you can see on these guns. It's okay, it's not anything special. I mean, you're not going to be shooting down much, but with the range and everything, it will get decent. It's St. Louis, though, that gets a lot of great anti-air. 104, 64, 90, and with, of course, AFT and the range mod, you shoot down a lot of planes with this one. But that's much further in the future, which is of course why AFT is quite a late game perk, or late tier perk. Anyway, that was my Algerie commentary. I will be returning with the Martel next, as I have to grind this line out now, and I can't really review the Henry IV yet, the new buffed one, since I never actually got to play it, because, well, the ships were taken from us before we actually got to test the buffed one, so hard to tell you how it works out, but based on the buffs, it seems pretty damn viable. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys the next time.